I still remember the clinking of glasses, the sound of laughter echoing through the banquet hall. My dad stood at the front, dressed in the sharpest suit I'd ever seen him wear, smiling like he just conquered the world. After all, he had. He'd built his lab equipment company from scratch, turned it into something people respected, something we were proud of. And that night, his retirement party, was supposed to be the night he passed the torch, the night he would hand the company over to me. I had spent days organizing every detail of the event, the venue, the food, the slideshow of his greatest achievements. I even picked the jazz band he always said reminded him of his younger years. I wanted it to be perfect, because I truly believed that after 7 long years working beside him, earning my place, he was going to keep his word. He had told me over and over again, "Son, one day this will all be yours." And I believed him. I lived by those words. Intro so. When he stepped up to that microphone, cleared his throat, and began his speech, I held my breath, and then I watched my world crumble in real time. He looked out into the crowd, smiled that proud smile, and said, "I'm excited to announce that the new CEO of our company will be Zach, my brother-in-law." I remember the blood rushing out of my face. My hands froze mid-clap. I couldn't breathe for a second, but everyone else stood up and cheered. And so I forced a smile. I clapped along like the good son I was raised to be. But inside, something cracked. Zach had only been in the company for a year, a single year. I had given my 20s to that business. Late nights, early mornings, weekends lost, holidays shortened. All for a promise my father broke without a second glance. Later that evening, when I asked him why, he looked me in the eye and said something I'll never forget. "You're too mentally weak to lead, son." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about business. This was personal. My father didn't trust me, not because of my skills, not because of my performance, but because I once dropped a bottle of anxiety meds during dinner. Because I had shared with him, foolishly, vulnerably, that I was being treated for something millions of people silently deal with every day. And in his eyes, that made me unfit. That was the last time I ever spoke to him, until everything changed. 2 years later, the same family who had turned their backs on me was now knocking on my door, desperate for help, because Zach, the golden son-in-law, had been arrested. Fraud. Big charges. The kind that don't just ruin reputations, they destroy legacies. And just like that, the son who was too weak suddenly became the only one strong enough to clean up the mess. You know, people say loyalty means everything in family businesses. That it's not just about what you bring to the table. It's about how long you've stayed at the table, how many storms you've weathered, how many times you've shown up when no one else would. Well, I showed up. For 7 long years, I showed up. I wasn't just clocking in and clocking out. I was there at 6 a.m., sometimes earlier, first to arrive, last to leave. I didn't just learn the business, I lived it. I worked in every department Dad asked me to. Sales, logistics, product design, even accounting, though I hated numbers. But I did it because he said it would. Make me a well-rounded leader. So I did everything right. I kept my head down, worked hard, stayed loyal. I let go of dreams, skipped birthdays, lost friends, all for the future he said I was building. And then came Zach. He married my sister Rachel. Nice enough guy, always smiling, always saying the right things. He was the kind of guy that could charm your wallet out of your pocket and make you thank him for it. Slick, polished, polite. He joined the company barely a year before my father retired. Got hired into some strategic development role that, truth be told, didn't even exist before him. I assumed it was Dad's way of giving his new son-in-law a place in the family legacy, a gesture, not a real career path. I was wrong. Turns out, while I was busy sweating in the trenches, Zach was sitting in Dad's office having long lunches and exchanging ideas. He said all the right buzzwords: modernize, streamline, brand synergy, words that made executives nod and pretend they understood, and somewhere along the way, Dad fell for it, or maybe he just wanted a version of himself, someone confident, sharp-tongued, unbothered by vulnerability. Zach never talked about fear or doubt. He didn't have anxiety. He didn't need medication. But me? I did. And I made the mistake of trusting my own family with that truth. It happened one night at dinner, a few months before the retirement party. I was helping clear the table and my prescription bottle slipped out of my coat pocket. My mom picked it up, read the label quietly, then handed it back with a soft, understanding smile. Dad just stared. He didn't say much that night, but the silence said everything. After that, things changed. He became colder, more distant. Started including Zach in meetings he used to have with me. Stopped asking my opinion. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe he was just preparing for retirement and delegating more, but now I know he'd already made his choice. And when I asked him why after 7 years of grinding, of giving everything I had, he said, because you're not strong enough to lead, not with that condition. As if anxiety were a stain on my record, not something I managed with care, professionalism, and self-awareness. I wanted to scream, to yell that I had never once dropped the ball, that I had delivered on every project, that clients respected me, that my team believed in me, that I had earned it. But all he saw was a weakness, and that's when I realized, in his eyes, I was no longer a son. I was a risk. I left the party before the cake was even cut. People were still laughing, dancing, toasting the new CEO, but I couldn't breathe in that room. The lights felt too bright, the music too loud. My chest was tight, and it wasn't the anxiety this time. It was heartbreak. I got in my car and drove aimlessly for hours. Just me, the road, and the sound of my own thoughts replaying that moment over and over. My father's words rang louder than any music. You're too weak to lead. I kept asking myself, how did we get here? How did the man who once told me I was his pride and joy look me in the eye and call me a disappointment? The next morning, I didn't go to work. I didn't call. I didn't even pack my office. I just didn't show up. And no one called to check on me either, not even Dad. A few days later, I handed in my formal resignation. No dramatic speech, no long explanation, just a 2-sentence email. It hurt, but I needed to protect what was left of my dignity. My mom was the only one who reached out. She called, softly asking if I was okay. She said she didn't agree with what had happened, but, "Your father's always been stubborn," her way of saying she didn't want to take sides. And maybe I didn't expect her to, but it still stung that she didn't say more. My sister Rachel didn't call at all. In fact, when she found out I quit, she told Mom I was overreacting. She said I was making a personal drama out of a professional decision. That it wasn't about me. That hurt more than I expected. I had always been close to Rachel. Growing up, we used to sit by the fireplace and share everything. Secrets, fears, silly childhood dreams. She was the one who used to say, no matter what, we're a team. But when it came down to it, she chose to defend her husband, not her brother. And just like that, my family became a set of closed doors. I started over, found a new job. Smaller company, less prestige, but more peace. The kind of place where people said, good morning, and meant it. I didn't tell anyone about what had happened. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to work, rebuild, and breathe again. But the truth? Starting over wasn't easy. Even though I'd walked away on my own terms, a part of me still felt like I had been pushed out. Like I'd been told I wasn't enough. And somewhere deep down I believed it. I began second-guessing myself in meetings. I hesitated before making decisions. I'd lie awake at night, wondering if my father had been right. if maybe I was weak. If maybe my anxiety did make me less of a leader, I'd like to tell you I bounced back quickly, that I shook it off and proved everyone wrong. But it took time. Months of therapy, journals filled with scribbled self-doubt, long walks in the cold just to clear my head. And slowly, the pieces of me started coming back together. And the irony? My anxiety, the thing my father thought made me weak, became the very thing that made me more self-aware, more compassionate, more grounded. Turns out, knowing your limits and knowing when to walk away, that's not weakness. That's strength. It started with a phone call. One of those calls where you already know, just from the way the phone rings, that something's wrong. It was my mom. Her voice was shaking. "Zach's been arrested," she whispered. Like if she said it too loud, it might become more real. "They're charging him with tax fraud. Serious stuff. And your father, he's under investigation too." I remember sitting there in silence, blinking at the wall. For a second, I thought it was some kind of twisted joke. Zach? Mr. Clean-Cut? Mr. Polished PowerPoint? But no, this was real, and it was serious, federal kind of serious, and that's when she said it. "We need your help." My heart sank. Not because of what she said, but because of what I knew was coming. She wanted me to step in, to smooth things over, maybe testify on my father's behalf, maybe talk to some people I knew in the industry. I had worked there for years. I had been on the inside. I knew the systems, the protocols, the people. They were hoping I still had enough goodwill left in me to put out a fire I didn't start. But I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said flatly. There was silence on the other end. Then came the guilt. "Trip." "But this is your family," she said, voice cracking. "Your father's in trouble. He could lose everything. We could lose everything." I bit my lip. I could feel my hands shaking. Not from anxiety this time, but from anger. After everything they did, now they were calling me? I took a deep breath and said, "If he wanted my help, he should have asked me before he decided I wasn't good enough to lead his company. Before he looked me in the eye and told me I was weak." "You're being petty," she snapped. "You're holding on to something that happened 2 years ago while the family is falling apart." And there it was. That word again. Petty. I hung up not long after that. Told her I wouldn't be involved. Told her they were on their own, but I'd be lying if I said I walked away feeling good. I didn't. I felt hollow, like I had slammed a door that might never open again. And worse, I didn't even know if I wanted it to. For 2 years, my mother had been the only thread I had left to the family. Now even that was fraying. She blocked my number after I told her maybe this was karma, maybe this was what happens when you cast your own son aside. I hated myself for saying that. The moment it came out of my mouth, I wanted to take it back. But I didn't. And she didn't give me a second chance. One click, and she was gone. The days after that were dark. Even with friends around me, I felt alone in a way I hadn't in years. Not because I missed Zach or even my father, but because I missed what used to be. The way my family used to feel. When we were still a team. When trust wasn't a currency and love didn't come with conditions. But I knew this much. I wasn't going back into that fire. I had spent 2 years rebuilding my sense of worth. I wasn't going to throw it all away just because they needed something now, especially when, for 2 years, they hadn't needed me. A few days after that call with Mom, I thought maybe things would quiet down. Maybe they'd get the message, that I had made my decision and I wasn't going to bend. But then came the knock on the door. It was Rachel. I hadn't seen my sister in over 2 years. And when I opened the door, I barely recognized her. The confident, composed Rachel I once knew looked like a shadow of herself. Eyes swollen from crying, shoulders hunched like she'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "I just need a minute," she said, her voice breaking. "Please." I didn't have the heart to turn her away. No matter how angry I was, no matter how much it still hurt. Seeing her like that, I couldn't slam the door on her. So I let her in. She sat on my couch, fidgeting with her hands, trying to hold herself together. She said she had no idea what Zach had been doing, that if she had known, she would have stopped it. She kept repeating, "I didn't know, I swear I didn't know." Then she got to the point. Dad said, "Someone at your new job is married to a federal judge," she said cautiously. "We were hoping you could talk to them. Maybe just put in a word. Help smooth things over." I felt my stomach turn. She wasn't here for me. She was here for a favor. I stood up and walked across the room just to get some space. "You want me to risk my job, my reputation, to help the same people who abandoned me?" She blinked at me, tears streaming down. "We're desperate. Please. We'll pay whatever you want." That made it worse, like my integrity was something they could put a price tag on. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not getting involved, Rachel. Not with this. Not with federal fraud." She stared at me for a moment, then scoffed through her tears. "So that's it? You're still angry? Still punishing us for something that wasn't even Zach's fault?" I closed my eyes, took a breath. "This isn't about punishment. This is about boundaries. I won't compromise my values just because you're in a crisis. I didn't ask for any of this." She stood up, voice rising. "Mom was right. You are selfish." And just like that, the air turned cold. I looked her in the eye and said, "You didn't think I was selfish when I worked 70 hours a week for Dad, or when I gave up my 20s for the company. You only think I'm selfish now. Because for once I chose me." She didn't respond, just stormed out the door, slamming it behind her, and I stood there in the silence, wondering if that would be the last time I ever saw my sister. Because that's the thing about family. The ones who ignore you when you're down are often the first to call when they're drowning, and you start to realize sometimes the people who share your blood are also the ones who bleed you the slowest. It had been 4 days since Rachel slammed the door behind her. I hadn't heard a word since. No texts, no calls, no knocks. And just when I began to think maybe they'd finally leave me be, I heard one. A knock. Not the hesitant kind. Not the desperate tapping of someone begging. No. This was steady, deliberate, familiar. I looked through the peephole, and there they were, my parents, both standing there. My father in a plain jacket I hadn't seen him wear in years, and my mother, with her hands clasped tightly in front of her like she was bracing for a storm. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. "There's nothing left to say," I said. I already made myself clear, but my father's voice came through softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm not here to ask for help. That stopped me cold. I'm here to apologize." I opened the door, just a crack. He looked older. Not just aged, but tired. Like a man who'd seen too much of his own reflection and didn't like what he saw. He didn't ask to come in. Just stood there and spoke. "I made a mistake," he said. "Not just with the company. With you. I told myself I was doing what was best for the business, but really, I was afraid." He looked me in the eye, and for once, I didn't see the man who built a company. I saw a man who had broken something and was finally realizing it couldn't be rebuilt overnight. "I didn't understand mental health," he said. "I thought it meant weakness. I thought it meant you couldn't handle pressure. But I was wrong." He took a breath, voice cracking just slightly. "I started seeing signs in myself these past few months. The nerves, the insomnia, the tightness in my chest. I looked up what you were going through, and I realized you were never weak. You were fighting harder than I ever knew." I didn't say a word. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I was feeling too much. "I should have come sooner," he continued, "but I was too proud. And then, everything fell apart. And suddenly I wasn't proud anymore. just ashamed. He paused. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not here to win you back. I just needed to tell you. I was wrong. I see that now, and I'm sorry. And that was it. No excuses, no pressure, just truth. It caught me off guard. For 2 years, I had imagined every possible reunion. Angry fights, slammed doors, maybe even a courtroom scene. But not this. Not quiet honesty. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, voice low. Not yet. He nodded. That's fair. My mother stepped forward, placing her hand gently over mine. I should have listened more, she whispered. I should have stood up for you when you needed it most. I was just scared we'd lose everything. I swallowed hard. You already did, I whispered. But something in me, something small, fragile, stubbornly hopeful, didn't slam the door. Instead, I said, I need time. That's all I can give right now. They nodded, both of them. Then they turned and walked away. No begging, no strings. Just space. And somehow that space felt like the beginning of something. Maybe not a happy ending, but maybe, just maybe, the start of healing. It's been a few months since that knock on my door. Since then, I've met with my parents a few times, just dinner once a month. No talk about the company, no rehashing old wounds, just small steps. Rachel came to see me too, not long after. This time, no begging, no requests, just her. Standing there with her eyes full of regret, she apologized, sincerely. She told me she had filed for divorce, said she realized, too late, that she'd ignored what mattered, that when the house burned down, she saw who was really standing outside in the cold. I told her what I told the others. I'll think about it. And I did. Last month, I told my family I was willing to try again. Not for them, not because of guilt, but for me. Because anger, even when justified, is a heavy thing to carry. So now, once a month, we sit at a table again. We talk, we laugh, a little awkwardly. It's not perfect, but it's real. And as for the company, Dad offered me the CEO role again, said the board would back it, said he wanted to step away for good. I told him I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe someday. He didn't push. He just nodded, and this time he meant it. In the meantime, I've been focusing on something, or someone, else. Her name's Olivia. We used to be old friends back when life was simpler. A few months ago, she reached out. Just a coffee, just catching up. She asked me why I looked so tired. I told her the truth, the whole story. For the first time, someone didn't flinch when I said the word anxiety. She smiled and said, "That just means you've lived. We've been together ever since, and you know what? For the first time in a long time, I'm not waking up with a tight chest. I'm not waiting for a call that never comes, or a pat on the back that doesn't feel earned. I'm just living. So yeah, maybe family does fall apart sometimes. Maybe trust gets broken, and words leave scars. But maybe, just maybe, if enough truth gets spoken and enough time passes, some things can be rebuilt, not because they were perfect, but because they mattered. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If you found something in here that resonated with your own life, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, just know you're not alone. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes the bravest is walking back. When it's safe to do so, take care of yourself. And hey, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. There are more real-life stories like this one. And trust me, some of them might just hit home. See you next time. Thank you for watching.